Welcome to the December Wake Up Newport. Happy holidays to all of you. I hope you are all more prepared for Christmas than I am. I do my shopping on the 24th, so.
Prime member.
Yes. I told my wife I loved her when I married her, and I told her if it changed, I'd let her know, so. We're glad to have you all here, glad to have all the students with us this morning. We have an exciting program. And as is the tradition, it is my responsibility, notice I didn't use the word pleasure, to bring forward the mayor of the business community, Dr. Stephen.
Hey, my mom would be happy to know I'm a doctor. She wanted me to doctor, and I just became a lawyer. So welcome to our last Wake Up Newport of the year, our December edition. It's great to see the room is packed. I thought 120 seats would be more than enough, and it looks like I'm about 20 short. So for those of you in the back, I think there's a few up here if you want to fill in so you don't have to stand. I'm Steve Rosansky, President and CEO of the Newport Beach Chamber of Commerce, and welcome. We have a few dignitaries I'd like to quickly introduce. So with that, I'll start with our City Council members. Brad Avery is here with us this morning. And former mayor and current councilwoman Diane Dixon is here with us. Diane's a regular. We love seeing Diane here. And Brad, too, of course. We hope you'll come more often. Our Community Development Director, Simone Georges, is with us this morning. Simone. He's a good guy to know if you're building anything in town. That's the go-to guy. That's my go-to guy. Tara Finnegan, our PIO, Public Information Officer. Tara's back there. Our harbor master, right, for another few more days, Carol Jacobs. Carol, right, back there. I was teasing her yesterday. I called her something else, and she let me know. She's still the harbor master until Monday? Until Monday. Okay, great. Thank you for coming. Chief Lewis, Chief Lewis came this morning. There he is. I had him down. I hadn't seen him, but I knew he'd make it by the time we started. Thank you, Chief. Pierce Swan's with us, with the Irvine Ranch Water District. So all you folks out there in blue blazers that say DECA, welcome this morning, the DECA Club from Harbor High School, Newport Harbor High School. Thank you. And Sheridan Hurst, their director's way back there. Sheridan, she had a long list. How many are here this morning from DECA? 67. Whoa. Good thing we had a lot of food. Also this morning, the FBLA from Corona Del Mar High School is here, Future Business Leaders of America. Raise your hand if you're with FBLA. There we go, FBLA, good showing from them. So with that, I hope I didn't miss anybody. Former Mayor Keith Curry is here with us, thank you. And City Council candidate, I'll give you one more shout out, Tim, for the City Council candidate, he almost squeaked it out, Tim Stokes. But there is a recount. At 3:30 as of yesterday, I hadn't heard about a recount. Is there a recount?
36 votes.
36 votes. It was. See, this is a great lesson for you students that most of you probably hadn't voted in the last election. I don't think you're probably 18 yet. But election that we just had for City Council came down to 36 votes out of how many? Almost 40,000?
43,000.
43,000 votes were cast, and 36 vote difference between one candidate and the other. So your vote really does matter. So when you're eligible to vote, please make sure you do so. It's very important. It's part of your civic duty. So with that being said, our sponsor is, purposely I missed you, Stan. Our sponsor is here this morning, Dee Dee with Credit Union of Southern California Bank. Dee Dee, you want to come up and say a few words? Come on. I said, Credit Union of Southern California Bank. I had the bank. Okay, they're not a bank. They're just a credit union. We're going to just have to.
Just a credit union.
No, I mean, there's not both. It's great to be a credit union. I have a credit union membership.
Good morning.
It's even better to be a credit union.
There you go. Now we're rolling.
You got out of that one.
Exactly. Again, my name is Dee Dee. I am the current branch manager of the Costa Mesa office of Credit Union of Southern California. We are a major financial institution in the area. We have over 18 branches, and we are a full-service financial. So that means basically that we can do anything you need as far as credit services or other banking services. So if you're interested, please come and see me. Thank you.
They do it soup to nuts there. And they have a brand new branch there in the Triangle, or across from the Triangle, the Costa Mesa Courtyards, is that what it's called? Yeah, Costa Mesa Courtyards at Harbor and Newport Boulevard, yeah. So thank you, Dee Dee. And then also, she was dashing through the snow, or the rain, and she made it finally. Chef Linda with Philomena's, why don't you come up and say a few words and tell us about what you do? She owns Philomena's restaurant. It's in Costa Mesa on Newport Boulevard. It's a great restaurant, Italian food. Tell us a little bit about it.
Hi, everybody. I'm Chef Linda Johnson. I own Philomena's Italian Kitchen, and right next door to it attached is Philomena's Italian Market. I've been in that location for over 6 years. I live in Newport Beach. I am a real estate broker in Newport Beach as well, but I don't do that anymore. Well, I do, but... So anyway, Philomena's my grandmother. I named it after her because nobody would go to Linda's Italian Kitchen. So anyway, we're what we refer to as a 98% scratch kitchen, which means 98% of everything that goes out of our restaurant and market is made in-house by us. So please stop in. I know somebody has already said that they've been at the restaurant and love it. There you go. Thank you. So we're on the corner of Santa Isabel and Newport Boulevard, right across the freeway from Vanguard University, and I hope to see everybody there. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Yeah, the food is excellent there. It's a really nice place if you want to go out someplace special. So with that, I will turn the meeting back over to our illustrious head of Master of Ceremonies here, Rush Hill.
Well, this morning I'm very pleased to be able to introduce our Fire Chief, Chip Duncan. Fire Department's certainly one of my family's favorite. I have a grandchild that I think will end up in the Fire Department. A little hard to tell, he's only 3 years old, but it seems to be his total focus. The Chief has been our Chief since 2017 and was appointed by the City Manager at that point in time. And he's actually been in the department since 1987. He has served in almost every position that exists in the department, from a firefighter to a captain to a trainer, and has some significant credentials. He comes from a family of firefighters. His father, retired firefighter, his brother and son are both existing firefighters. And so we're very pleased to have him lead one of the two most important first responder organizations that we have. I say that because the fire chief, the police chief is standing back there, and he carries a gun. So, but with that, we'll ask Chip Duncan to come up and tell us everything fire.
So really quickly translated, I'm a really old guy, I've been around for a long time, right? So a couple things. Number one, my goal here today is to educate you and shed some light on a very complex problem. Also, just because I have a limited amount of time, if you're here to talk about Buck Gully, and there are some folks here who want to talk about Buck Gully, we will huddle up after my presentation and we'll talk about that. So more than happy to have that dialogue, but if you want to have that dialogue, let's wait until after the presentation. All right, so wildland fires has kind of been a little bit of a big topic here recently. I get a lot of phone calls, a lot of questions about it. Like I said, it's a very complicated and dynamic problem issue that isn't going to go anytime soon. A little more about me. I started my career as a forestry firefighter. I started with California Department of Forestry back in 1985. So my roots are in forestry, and the things I've seen change, because I still have lots of friends, well, a lot of them are retired now, but friends in forestry, and that was kind of my home, and a lot of attachment to forestry and how things go in the wildland arena. So that's where I started. So obviously you've seen all the pictures out there of us going out and doing our thing, fighting fires, and buildings burning down, and all this cataclysmic doomsday type things are going on. Part of my objective here today is to educate you on how this kind of gets blown out of proportion by the media, and they put a different spin on it because they're trying to sensationalize things. This really comes down to kind of more of a science based problem, and you can get your head wrapped around it based on what we do know about what's going on out there. So what the heck is going on out there? Well, climate change is a reality, and that's not a political statement. We know that things are warmer now. Is that a normal trend? Is it due to something human beings have done? Really, nobody really knows for sure, depending on who you talk to. But I can tell you from my personal experience, having been on the job, fire season goes an inordinately longer amount of time than it has in the past. One of the whole reasons I took a job here in Newport Beach, when I was a seasonal firefighter, I would get laid off because fire season would come to an end. That does not happen anymore. They take their seasonals and they basically work those guys and gals all year long because fire season is all year long now in California. So the term that we use now, the Forest Service just switched to a term called fire year. It used to be fire season. Now the federal government, the Forest Service, they use the term fire year because it's such a long-term event. Some of the other things that affect us, you've heard about the bug kill. That's out there. A lot of our pine trees, our forests aren't as healthy as they once were. So the bug kills had a significant impact on the severity of our fires. And then the persistent drought. And we get a little bit of rain, we have one good year of rain, but California basically, that's the way the ecosystem is, kind of a drought-driven ecosystem. And when we come in and change the ecosystem by planting different plants that aren't native plants, that also changes the impact of droughts on plants that aren't natural plants here in California. So there's a lot of cascading events that go along with climate change, and things are warmer. There's a combination, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So you can see here from the stats, this is the latest, greatest one I have from the Forest Service. They haven't updated it yet, but we have upturns and downturns. But you can see here from the 1980s all the way up to about 2015, it's been trending upwards. But you can also see here too, we have our down years. There's years when we're not as busy as we have in other years. In the early 90s, we were in Malibu a lot. That Malibu fire that we had a couple weeks ago, we had several of those back in the early 90s with the same outcome. It burned into Malibu and burned up a bunch of homes. So that's nothing new. That's happened a couple times in the past, and people have kind of forgot that had actually happened about 1992 and 93. So the Forest Service has determined that with the way that the climate has changed, that there's an additional 78 days that we add that were considered part of fire season, now fire year. So that is documented, that's proven. And the federal government, when they look at the way they're going to staff their seasonal employees, this is what they take into account. How long do I have to keep my seasonal employees on? The Forest Service has a lot more seasonal employees than CAL FIRE. I mean, they're very seasonally driven. They lay people off, hire them back. They bounce all over the place. And it's also because they go across the United States. Remember, the weather changes. If you're in the southeastern part of the United States, spring times when they get their big fires there. Then kind of late spring, it moves up to Alaska. And then we're familiar with the kind of June, July, August, September for California, where it kind of starts in the north. The fires start in June in the north and work their way down from Oregon, Washington, till like right now in Southern California. Remember this time last year, what fire was going on last year this time? From the Thomas Fire? Okay, at the time, it was the largest fire in California history, which has changed, and we'll talk about that. So part of this is we are part of the problem with how we manage our forests. We're kind of a victim of our own success. The old saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, definitely fits with how we manage our forests and a lot of the problems we had. For a long time in nature, fire is part of nature. You have a lightning strike, it would start the light flashy fuels on fire. It would kind of burn off all the lighter vegetation, all the little saplings in the forest, which was good because that would create a healthier forest. It would get rid of the competition for the larger, healthier trees. Well, as time has gone on, we've been more and more proficient about knocking down small fires because now we have people who live in the forest or abut the forest. There's a little more of a game changer with people being involved. So we're obligated to go and knock those fires down. So between that mindset of kind of letting them burn because there's nobody there and jumping on fires and putting them out, we've kind of got to the place now where we need to do controlled burns. And back when I was a seasonal firefighter for the state of California, we would actually go out on days like today, rainy, cloudy days, and would actually do a controlled burn. The downside with controlled burn, there is always a possibility sometimes the fire gets away from you. I know that whenever the Forest Service was doing a burn, I'd always put my name in for extra duty because they would screw up and the fire would escape and I get overtime out of it. It was great. So that was always a given. But on a serious note, that the controlled burn part was important. Well, that became very controversial too as far as, what are we burning and how are we doing? So they backed off a lot on us doing controlled burns. And that was another piece of the puzzle that caused a problem. And then you can talk about logging and some of the other things that go on. So it's kind of a lot of cascading events tied together that have created our problem thus far. A term here that you probably have heard already is wildland-urban interface. And I've got a map later on that kind of shows a little more of this. But wildland-urban interface basically addresses that we now have a lot more people that live out in what we would call rural areas or wildland areas. Where I grew up in East County of San Diego, there's all these little communities out in the middle of basically nowhere, surrounded by a bunch of brush and scrub oak and whatever else, and every couple of years a big fire blows through, then it burns up half this little town and all the little houses around it. So now we've moved on to the more major urban suburban areas like Los Angeles, Orange County, and we pushed out into those wildland areas, and we have homes out in those areas, and so we're starting to see an impact on those people, not the people in the rural areas, it's people in suburban California that are impacted. We have more people living in the interface areas, an increased population that continues to increase. We know that fire is a normal part of our ecosystem. We talked about that. And we talked about there are a lot of restrictions on how we manage our forests. Fortunately, though, they've taken a hard look at how we manage our forests, and they're starting to change some of those things. We're getting a more measured approach at what actually works and what actually doesn't work. And we are starting to use more controlled burns and managing our fuels. So the trajectory is a good one right now, and hopefully that continues. So you can see from the map here, this is California and how the wildland-urban interface has grown. If you look right here, that's Riverside County. You can see that's increased 75% since 1990. When I was a kid growing up, Temecula did not exist. I mean, there's a gas station, that was it. Now look at Temecula, Murrieta, those places are all developed. So we're pushing out farther and farther out in the wildland areas where 40, 50 years ago, we'd have a fire out there and nobody ever hear about it because it didn't impact anybody. Now you have a 10-acre fire and it's all over KNX 1070 because it's bumping up against homes and neighborhood, and they're worried they're going to lose structures. So that is definitely the game changer. More people moving out in the wildland areas. So fire behavior. There's three things that actually drive fires. They're wind-driven, slope-driven, and they're fuel-driven. Here in California, the ones that we have problems with are the ones right here. Wind-driven. The Woolsey fire we had a couple weeks ago was a significant wind-driven event. We're fortunate here in this part of Orange County where the Santa Ana winds don't get into alignment. We don't get a lot of wind. But talking to my guys who are up there, and we had guys up there, and we'll talk about that a little bit, they had a significant amount of wind up in the Malibu area. That's why the fire pushed all the way down to the ocean and made it the world's greatest fire break, the Pacific Ocean. We have never had a fire get past the Pacific Ocean. So I'm hoping to get out of my career before that happens. And then slope-driven, okay? If you live at the top of a hill, the way you think about it is fire travels the opposite way water does. Water rolls downhill, okay? Fire rolls uphill. That's the way it wants to burn because it'll preheat and it wants to run uphill. If you live at the top of a hill, in a chimney, a chute, any kind of depression leading up to your home, you're going to get significant fire behavior versus somebody else who does not live on a chimney or a chute. So the location of where your home is on a slope also impacts how the fire is going to affect your structure if you're at the top. Fuel driven, obviously here you can look. I would call this heavy fuel, all right? And the way that the rule of thumb that we use for heavy and light fuels are up the top of your boots. Okay, medium fuels come up to the tracks of the dozer, and anything above the tracks on the bulldozer are heavy fuels, and this is what I call heavy fuel. So if you have a wind-driven fire that's on a slope and you have heavy fuels, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to have Malibu, okay? And people move into these areas because they like the rural setting. They like the vegetation. They like the animals. That's the reason a lot of those folks moved out in these areas, and we understand. So they get a little bit uptight when we start coming and trying to manage it by cutting fire breaks, doing controlled burns, you know. So there's a little bit of that community issue there when we try to do things that, hey, I moved there for this specific reason to be in a rural area. So in California, we have what we call, the new term now, if you watch the news, that we call mega fires. Okay, the mega fires, like the mega shark, really big, disastrous fires. We're very fortunate here in California, because we've had these fires going on forever and ever and ever in California. Probably one of the biggest fires we ever had that kind of was a game changer for us was 1960, the Bel Air fire. Bel Air fire happened, it bordered LA County, LA City, Forest Service, a bunch of different jurisdictions. And unfortunately, because we were not organized back then as the fire service, we lost a lot of homes that we shouldn't have lost because everybody was on a different frequency. We didn't speak the same language. Their command structure was different. So 1960 Bel Air fire was the game changer. And we finally came up and said, look, we have wildland fires in California, and we have a wildland fire in California. We need to pull resources from all around the state, different counties, and show up. So when we get there, we can do our job and fight fire effectively and put the fire out. You fast forward to 2018, it's amazing how many resources we can leverage on a wildland fire, how quickly we can leverage those resources on a wildland fire here in California. The nice thing is, and this is happening multiple times, I leave Orange County at 2 o'clock in the morning, they send me to Calavera County. All right, I get there, I know who to check in with, I know who my boss is going to be, I know what frequencies we're going to be on, I know all the things I need to need to do when I go out in the morning when the sun rises is to go out and fight fire. And that didn't happen by accident. That was a very concerted plan. So in California, California OES, Office of Emergency Services, oversees all the fire services in California. And then you get to the local level, you've got Orange County Fire, there's what our OP area coordinator. So Orange County Fire coordinates all the fire agencies in Orange County. So if I have a fire in Butte County and I need to get resources to Butte County, I go through OES, OES reaches out to their different regions, and the OP area coordinator coordinates the units that we send up there to help them out. So it's a very organized system that gets things on the road pretty fast, and we move a lot of people and equipment in a pretty short amount of time, and not just move them, but we go right in the firefight. There's times that we've driven all night long, and we get there and they go, you're checking in, you're going out to Division X-ray, you're doing structure protection. You literally go from a parking lot with, in some McDonald's parking lot someplace to fire blowing up and making a run at you. So that's how quickly you put people into a fight, and we're pretty proud of that. So the fire service, just like the military, we love acronyms. We can talk for minutes, hours, days, and you can never understand what we're saying, right? So some of the ones that you may hear out there that are interesting for the general public, we have a thing called EMAC, and EMAC stands for the Emergency Management Assistance Compact. And what that is that's an agreement that when our resources in California get overwhelmed, I can reach out to New Mexico, Arizona. We even had units from Texas here in California, about 15 units from Texas. So we reach out beyond California, and then very frequently the other states will reach out for California resources. We had guys in Oregon last year, and I don't think anybody to Nevada, but we send our folks out too. So this is the way that we get help from outside of California, how we send people out, which wasn't always this way, and we've managed to wrench this and make it a lot better with the EMAC agreement. The California Fire Assistance Agreement is managed by OES. That's basically how we get paid. So one of the things people always ask me when we tell them we have people out on the big fires, who's paying for this? Well, it's going down to who's paying, right? Theoretically, we are, because we're taxpayers. But when we send folks out, and we'll talk a little more about this, when we send folks out to help out, we actually have an agreement with the state, and the state reimburses us for our folks being out there on the fire. So they basically pick up the cost of the entire time they're gone, the backfill, everything. The state's very, very good about making sure that they pay for this. State's smart. They know they need firefighters when the fire behavior spikes, but they can't keep a standing firefighting force because it's too expensive. So basically, we're like extra help or assistance by hire folks, and they call us in, and they basically pay us, and then they cut us loose and send us home. SRA, State Responsibility Area. So the state of California manages the wildland that's like a state park, like Crystal Cove State Park is a state responsibility area. If you go into national forest, that's FRA, that's federal responsibility area. Where that gets important is, again, who pays for what. Orange County is unique because it's what we call a contract county. There is no CAL FIRE in Orange County. Orange County Fire contracts with CAL FIRE, and they handle all the wildland firefighting. So there's a fire in Orange County Fire is responsible for the bulldozers, the hand crews, the helicopters. They get money from the state to do that, but ultimately the fire authority is responsible to deal with the fire, and they're the contract. LA County is a contract county, Santa Barbara, Kern. I'm trying to think who else out there is a contract county. So there's not a lot of them. CAL FIRE pretty much covers the state. There's a few contract counties that are out there. And then MTZ, Mutual Threat Zone. So again, Newport Beach, if you go south of Newport Beach, Crystal Cove State Park, that butts up against Newport Beach. We also have the stuff along the beach. That's what we call a mutual threat zone, which we've determined that if there's a fire in the mutual threat zone, it's going to threaten the state responsibility area. We will get aircraft, dozers, all those kind of things on the state dime. We won't have to pay for it. So it's kind of nice. If you look at our MTZ map, it basically covers all the wildland areas south of Cameo Shores, Cameo Highlands, all the way up Newport Coast. So the overlay map shows that that's a threat to the state responsibility. So the state wants to keep the fire out of their land, so they'll be proactive and they'll pick those fires up outside their responsibility area. So that works to our advantage where we get those resources basically for free. We talked about this. The way that this works is we send OES, our salary survey. They know exactly what our folks make, captain, firefighter, battalion chief. So we have the salary survey. They take the salary survey, we update it every July, send it back to the state. So they have that on record. It covers the cost of our personnel portal to portal. That means the minute they leave till the minute they come back. And it covers their backfill when they're gone too. So that body that goes away, we hire back for that body and the state pays for it. So we don't typically darken fire stations because we don't have personnel. We backfill from our other shifts to cover that So it actually works out quite well. The only time the stations will go dark is if we punch a bunch of units out right away. It takes us a while to get folks back. Our folks are real good about coming back when we have a big resource request. The Woolsey fire, we sent 2 engines out, and those stations were backfilled pretty quickly, probably within an hour after we sent folks out. And contrary to popular belief, there's a myth within the fire service that we make a gigantic profit on those people we send out. We don't. We do get an admin fee, and Angela Crespi, our admin manager, the amount of time that she puts into processing the paperwork, it's state, so there's like 50 million, triplicate copies of whatever else you got to send in. That admin fee, I think if there's a profit there, it's like 0.0001%. So I want to get that urban myth that we don't turn a profit on sending folks out. We basically break even. So right now, this is one of the hardest things to track because everything's so dynamic, the latest numbers aren't in. So if you look at July 2013, 2014, $242 million is what we spent. July 17 to July 18, $773 million. Some of that's, the costs are still going in. Now from July of 18 and still not done, this is what the state, what OES owes to us, $972,000. Our folks were out a lot. So I know Chief Boyles had a strike team up in the Mendocino complex. We had guys in the Woolsey fire. We've been all over the state. This is what they owe us. I can only imagine what they owe places, bigger fire departments. We're 8 fire stations. There's a lot of bigger places out there. That's a significant amount of money. And, we're only 1 week away from another fire season kicking back up again with winds and being dry. The rain is great, but you know how California weather is. It can be 85 degrees next week with winds and dry out. So when we send something out, what do we send out? You may have heard the term strike teams. Well, when we send things out, we try to send them out in a manageable package. Like I said, one of the key things is when we go outside the county or other jurisdictions, it's nice to know what I'm getting. So we have a standardized resource request. So when I call dispatch and say, I want 10 type 1 strike teams, they know it's 5 engines and 1 leader, a battalion chief. And I can ask for engines, I can ask for dozers. There's a resource request I can ask for as the incident commander. I know exactly what I'm getting. That's another thing that's kind of unique to California. I was in Texas for the hurricanes, for Hurricane Katrina. Back then, they did not have a standardized resource ordering system. So if you wanted something, it was all over the place, and dispatch was completely confused what they were asking for. Here in California, you click the radio, and you get a standard package of what you're looking for, which is really, really nice. When you're the incident commander, you need something, this is what I want, and more than likely, you're going to get it pretty darn quick. So in our system, we typically send 1 engine in a mixed agency strike team. So in Orange County, you have Orange County Fire Authority, then you have Metro Cities. And Metro Cities is Huntington Beach, Anaheim, Orange, Fullerton, Brea, Newport, Costa Mesa, Laguna Beach. So we'll pick 1 engine from each city and make a strike team of 5 so you don't totally strip one jurisdiction. The only time that we'll send a bunch of units out is if we have an immediate threat like in Laguna Beach. We will dump units as quickly as we can on that because we're trying to knock that fire down really quickly, and then we'll backfill those stations. So our computer-aided dispatch system figures out what stations are cover stations, and it figures all that out for us pretty quickly. They hit that button, and when those units go out, the computer's already figured out how we're going to backfill and cover those stations. That works really, really well too. We had some struggles with that a couple years ago, and I think we've got that down where it's not a problem anymore. We have strike teams. Those are the battalion chiefs that are trained. That's pretty arduous training to get our folks through that. For a while there, we had some retirements. I was the only strike team leader on the department. In a way, it was kind of cool, but after a while, it got kind of old when I was gone, and my wife kind of forgot who I was, and who are you showing up here at the house, So now we have our folks that are trained up, and that's a great experience. But I'll tell you what, of all the things I've done in the fire service, and I've done a lot of them, I've been pretty fortunate. The hardest thing I've ever done in the fire service is I get that phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning, say you're going to Calavera County, and I'm going with an engine from Anaheim, and I don't know those guys, an engine from Orange, I don't know those guys, and I might not even have a Newport engine on my strike team. I go someplace I'd never been, and of course, they don't give you maps, you're just kind of driving, you kind of get there, and you show up with people you don't know in a place you've never been, on a place that's on fire, and they expect you to put the fire out. To me, that is the most challenging thing I've ever done. It's pretty exhilarating and exciting in some respects, but also, it's still the toughest thing I think I've done in my career as far as operationally is taking a strike team someplace I haven't been and actually go to work. We also have folks that go out and will do what we call overhead assignments. So if you've ever seen these wildland fires, very vast resources. If you've been to fire camp's amazing. These things pop up overnight, and they have showers and supply, and you can get tires and hose and foam, and they feed us. It's pretty amazing. This thing pops up overnight, and then they demobilize and it's gone like the next day. So there's a lot of overhead required to run the medical and things like that. We'll send our folks out to be line paramedics. They go out on the line and they take care of folks that are out there if they get hurt. We also have some of our folks that are PIOs. There's a lot of different overhead positions that we'll fill logistically to support the fire camp functions that are out there, not just the suppression functions. So we got some photos here. Obviously, this is the Mendocino complex. You can see that's a clear burn. And this is really interesting. When you start getting to places like Calaveras County and Butte County and Tuolumne County that don't typically see an engine that has a beach on it, and they see beach on your patch, they kind of give that funny look like going, you're a beach fire department, you're all the way here, you guys are a long way from home. And we're driving through Sheep Ranch Road in Butte County, and that long way from home, yep, that Sheep Ranch Road in Butte County is a long way from Newport Beach, let me tell you. The property values there are not as high as our property values here in Newport Beach, I can guarantee you that. But we did successfully defend that town. You can see here too, this same thing, one of our engines on the Mendocino complex. You can see, we call that a header. We can tell by the way that fire behavior is, a lot of energy because it's driving that cloud up high and it's condensed, compacted. Just a picture of a strike team. There's my car, this is from several years ago, but you can see that we actually got sent out one time with units from, talk about complicated. It wasn't Orange County units that I got signed. I got assigned Montebello, Arcadia, units from the Verdugo area up there. So talk about not having anybody that I know on the strike team. I'm not even in the same county, but the fires were so big, they were running out of strike team leaders, and we went up there, and it was a great assignment, and was the Butte fire. This was a fire we had in San Diego about 2015. This was actually 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And there's my car, there's an Anaheim engine. I ran into my old CDF chief. He was there in that car, and I'm standing over there talking to him, and we thought for sure we're going to lose all these homes in the neighborhood. This is a firewall that was about 300 feet high. You can't see the whole thing. I've never seen anything like this. This fire came down the hill, and it was a running fire. Usually fire backs down a hill. The winds were so strong, this fire ran down the hill, burned all around these houses. We defended these houses. It swung around and ran up to the top of the hill. Like I said, fire runs uphill, up a chimney, and there was homes at the top of the chimney, and absolutely blowtorched the house at the top of the chimney. They lost the houses on the hillside to our left, and there was guys up there. We could see them working. It just, when the wind made it run, there was no way they were going to stop that fire. Pretty impressive fire behavior. So after all this doom and gloom, what can you do as far as being prepared for a wildland fire? We do have areas in town that butt up against the wildland areas. There's some simple things you can do. There's a program called Ready, Set, Go. Most of it's applicable to us here in Newport Beach. There's some things that are maybe not quite so applicable, so we're going to hit them real quick. So if you look at this, this probably looks pretty familiar. This is like our Newport Coast area. We have fuel management zones in it. These are typically our newer neighborhoods, right? Our older neighborhoods. They were built before the codes changed, so we don't do the same level of fuel management there. So managing your fuels around your homes are important. If you have a homeowners association, they do that for you. The modern homes typically have by code, they have to have that. And we do have that by code. Newport Coast was built under that code. One of the things that people forget here too is that just because your house does not border a wildland area, you still are at risk for a wildland fire. What I mean by that, ember casts will fly up to a mile away from the fire front. So you may be in the middle of a neighborhood and far away from the edge of a canyon, and that ember will fly up and land on your shake shingle roof, and your house will catch on fire. I was in a freeway complex fire back in 2008, and we lost probably 6 or 7 homes on the interior of the neighborhood that weren't even touching the wildland. The ember cast blew some embers up on the house, got in the gutter, got stuck underneath the Spanish tile, and we lost homes because everybody else was, kind of along the edge perimeter. We didn't have enough units to pick up the stuff on the inside. We had to kind of triage homes, and we picked up some of them, but we lost some of them too. So living in the wildland urban interface, the ember zone, you have to have a house that we can defend. So the things that we're looking for a thing called defensible space. And this gets kind of complicated, but the bottom line is we have a book called the Incident Pocket Response Guide that we issue to all our people. And there's actually a checklist of structured defense. And the first thing for is a standalone structure. Do I need to stop and do I need to defend it? If you can stand alone, I'm going to drive by and go, your house is good. We're going to keep on moving. There's another house that I have to prep and defend. That's where I'm going to back my engine in your driveway, and I'm going to have to defend and actually deploy resources. Then as you go down the list, there's other ones that aren't as rosy, like rescue drive-by is the lowest one, where the only thing we're going to do is if there's somebody in the house, we're going to grab you and get you out of there. We can't defend your home because of there's no defensible space, there's vegetation up against the side of the house. So there are some homes we absolutely cannot defend. What we'll do with those houses, we'll wait for the fire front to pass through. We call it fire front following. We'll wait for the main body of the fire to pass through because it's so intense, and then we'll come back in real quick after that and try and knock down the fire after the main body of the fire passes through. A little more complicated. You can go online and pull up Ready, Set, Go, and it'll give you, this is probably the best one I found that talks about defensible space, keeping your trees limbed up and away from your chimneys, keeping your gutters clean. Don't store firewood up against the side of your house. So a couple years ago, my brother was also a firefighter, and his house was out by the lilac fire. So he was out on the fire. So I went out to his house to start setting his house up to defend his house. And my brother had firewood stacked up against the house. He had gas cans stacked up against the house. I mean, the guy did everything wrong that you're not supposed to do. So he gets a little grief from that from me and my dad about having a fire-safe house. So what's a hardened home? Basically, a hardened home is what have you done to prepare yourself for a fire? If you have a shake shingle roof, that's going to be a problem. There's those shake shingle roofs that are treated, that fire treatment doesn't last that long, depending on how much sun it gets. So shake shingle are bad. I pull my shake shingle off. I put composition on my roof. Spanish tile is great too, but it has limitations. The fire will get stuck up underneath the tiles, and we had fires up in Anaheim Hills caused by that. If your eaves aren't boxed in, that's a problem. Vents, if the screen, the bug vents, the screens are broken, the bug vent, it only takes a hole about this 3/8 of an inch in size for fire to get in there. It'll blow in your bug vents and get in your attic, and you get an attic fire. We had a lot of those in the Canyon 2 fire. Fire went through, thought the houses were fine. Embers got inside the attic space, so we had an attic space fire. Probably the biggest one too people don't really count on is you have a nice wood deck attached to your house. Embers will get up underneath that. That's the kindling, starts your wood deck on fire, and now we've got a problem. So basically, if you walk around your house, I would go online, I would look at this and take a look at your house and see how your house measures up and how it stacks up, because even with us being ready to go, we still have a 5-minute response time to get there. That fire gets established. If your house is hardened and it's defendable, it's going to slow that fire down enough where we can get there and actually make a difference when we show up. If you have a lot of the bad things going on, when it's blowing and it's hot out and the relative humidity is low, there's not a whole lot we're going to be able to do. And again, I have CERT folks so they know what, make a plan, have your papers ready to go, be ready to bug out. Go early. Okay, so you guys have all heard about the Paradise Fire, right? With all the fatalities up in Northern California, and it was up in Chico, Butte County. I actually defended that town back in 2008. All right, and it does not surprise me that that place burned down because the forest was overgrown, but the people who live out there lived out there for a reason. They did not want to. They were kind of like people who grew up in the Bay Area, and they didn't want. They had things going on out there. Let's put this. They didn't want people messing with them. They had a lot of horticulture going on, if you know what I mean. Okay. You could tell the only things that were green were the things they were growing. All right. So when they talk about making that 911 notification, that reverse 911 notification, and getting people to leave, that was difficult. The hardest thing to do for us is to get people to leave their home and evacuate. And that makes sense. Leaving your home, that's a pretty heavy-duty thing, leaving your home. So when they talk to those folks leaving early, 2 things happened. Those people really weren't super compliant to begin with because they lived out there for a reason. And number 2, they underestimated what the fire was going to do. And that's why a lot of those folks lost their lives, that kind of combination thing. So it'll be interesting. There'll be a lot of finger pointing going on, but at the end of the day, I think it was really nobody's fault. I think it was just kind of a combination of multiple factors. Okay, so real quickly, Laguna Fire, 1993, 17,000 acres, 391 homes destroyed, arson fire. That was the footprint. We stopped it at Newport Coast Road. The only thing that stopped it from blowing into Corona del Mar was the wind changed and blew it back into Irvine. I was actually on Coast Highway when that happened. I could feel the wind come up, humidity came up, and it went from offshore to an onshore and burned it right back up on itself. So the weather basically stopped this fire from coming into Newport. You can see the fire flow right there. It kind of chopped it off on the Newport end of it, but it blew right down into Laguna Beach. The wind got in alignment and ran right down the drainages into Laguna Beach. Santiago fires, we lost 16 homes, but this is another big one. 2017, again, arson fire. Freeway complex, this one was a little different, was caused by a faulty catalytic converter. We lost 314 homes, and this was the fire that we had the homes on the interior neighborhood that burned. What happened was We had a bunch of big fires in Santa Barbara and LA. We sent units out. This thing started up at Green River. We're in Santa Barbara. One of the guys on my strike team gets a phone call from his wife saying, hey, there's a fire that started in Green River. And from then on, it was like pandemonium. They were kicking units out of base camp and sending us all back home. We're supposed to be down for a day of rest. They sent us all home. So we left Santa Barbara after being on the line all night long and made it back just in time to protect homes up in Yorba Linda. And we actually were successful. We defended the homes. But we were resource poor because folks were out, and that's why we lost some homes on the interior neighborhoods. We just didn't have enough units. Canyon 2 fire, last year, there was some controversy over this as far as how Orange County Fire handled that. That's a very complicated story of what actually happened there. I've heard both sides of it. Fortunately, I think they're over that now, and I think they have a better understanding of how this is supposed to work when they get a report of smokes out in the burn. But 25 homes were destroyed, and these homes here were what we call modern construction, built under modern fire codes with non-combustible roofs, boxed-in eaves. But again, they had the biggest problem we had is people didn't clean their gutters out. And the embers would land in the gutter would catch on fire, it would get underneath the Spanish tile, it would start to burn, the sheeting underneath the Spanish tile, you get a roof fire. So we lost several homes that were modern construction because of junk in the gutter. So if you have gutters, clean your gutters out. Holy fire, fortunately this kind of the rural part of the county, this area is one of the only places we've ever used smoke jumpers. In the history of firefighting in Orange County once, and this was 2 years ago, we used smoke jumpers. It was so difficult to access. And the reason we didn't lose more homes, there's just not a lot out there, but they still lost 18 buildings. Again, arson, they caught the guy. Thomas Fire was last year. Matter of fact, it was this time last year, and I flew over that thing. It was a monster. That was the biggest fire. Mendocino Complex, Chief Boyles was up there on the Mendocino Complex. That was the biggest fire. It beat out the Thomas Fire. So they keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I've got a map that shows you how big these are. So this is in contrast to the city of San Francisco. This is the city and county of San Francisco. The Ranch Fire and the River Fire are what we call the Mendocino Complex. Carr Fire, these are all this year. Ferguson Fire, these are all this year. So pretty large fires. When we talk about a complex fire, that means we have two large fires in close proximity. So they'll share a common base camp and common resources and dispatch just to kind of make it easier to get folks in and out of there. But pretty darn big fires. I can't keep this thing updated. Obviously, this has changed. The Mendocino Complex is the latest one that they've changed in here. They're still doing the damage assessment from the Paradise Fire. That will change, so they can't keep up with it. But if you look down here, 2018, 2017, going all the way to 2018, 1932. I mean, we've had a lot of big fires since the early 2000s that have made the list. Largest wildfires. And then we have the most destructive. That's going to change. Obviously, Paradise is going to probably be at the top of that when they get done. They're not done doing the damage assessment. They're still looking for bodies up there. They will not be done mopping that fire up until probably the end of January. It's how long it's going to take them to do that. Woolsey Fire a couple weeks ago. That was another big one. We had folks up there. So my goal here today is to educate you. Obviously, it's a real kind of a thumbnail sketch of what's going on. But the bottom line is there's lots of resources to go out there and read up on this and go through Ready, Set, Go. Understand what kind of vegetation you should plant around your house. All those kind of things are going to make it a lot easier if we have a fire to defend your home and protect your home. So I recommend CAL FIRE's got a great website. I would go there and I would just kind of check it out and see what's going on. The Forest Service one is not as good as the CAL FIRE one, but they do have information that's beneficial. And that is it. Rush, how much time do I have? Okay, I'll let you do the question selection.
So we have just a little bit of time, so maybe a couple of questions we can deal with. Are there any questions from the audience, other than from Steve? All right, Steve, you it. Stan.
Why don't you clean up the forest? They'll take away the fuel. All these dead trees laying around there are fuel.
Well, that's back to the original where they were restricting us on what we could and couldn't do. Back in the old days, we go in there, we'd drag some fire through, we'd fire out the forest, or burn off all the little saplings, all the dead stuff. But for a while there, back in the 80s, they changed that. They didn't want us doing a lot of forestry management. There was an article that I read a couple years ago that if Christopher Columbus came to the United States today, he would not recognize the forests here because they're so overgrown. So that's a huge thing. What's that?
Can you do it now, clean the forest?
Well, again, there's regulations on what we can and can't do based, when you get on federal land and state land, it's really restrictive what you can and can't do. There's areas where they don't even let us use bulldozers on state and federal land because it damages the environment. So we have to follow the rules. The environmentalists have rules. We have to follow those. We're getting better. We've learned. We're not there yet. Like I said, we're on a positive trajectory as far as how we're managing the forest. We're getting better. We're not going backwards. So we should be there, but like anything, it's like turning an aircraft carrier. It takes a while to get that thing turned in the right direction and get set on the right course.
All right, another question, back here in the back corner.
My question is, how much does one of your fire trucks cost? How long does it last? And when you go to recharge it from a fire hydrant, how long does that take? Like in one of these remote areas?
Okay, so the question is how much they cost, how long they last, and how long does it take to refill the tank? Okay, so our engines are what we call a Type 1 engine. They're a structure engine. There's different kind of engines. A Type 3 is a brush engine, and we've been kind of looking at possibly buying a Type 3 engine so we have more accessibility. There's areas that we can't get to with the Type 1 engine. You know, Type 3 is a four-wheel drive. A Type 1 engine like ours typically costs between about $525,000 and $550,000. They're frontline service for 12 years. And then we rotate them after about 20 years of service. They go into reserve status, and we use them as a reserve unit. If a unit goes into to get maintenance done, or we set them out on strike team, we'll pull a reserve unit out. So they last, they last for a long time. And we buy good equipment, so it does last. So city council members, thank you for buying the good stuff. It lasts. Little plug there. So how long does it take to charge your 500-gallon tank? Those engines carry 500 gallons of water. It just depends on how much pressure you have in your tank. We get water from fire hydrants, modern fire hydrants. We all have a thing. If you go in rural areas, there's a thing called a wharf hydrant. It's this kind of goofy looking pipe sticking up out of the ground. If you get 250 gallons a minute out of it, you're doing really, really well. So that's kind of based on what your water source is. And then the other source of water we get, a water tender, a tanker will give us water, or we can actually draft water out of a lake or a stream. And most city fire departments don't do that. So hydrants, wharf hydrants, or a water tender.
All right, one more question. Here.
Are you reimbursed for your engine equipment, depreciation, wear on when you go to a fire, or is it just personnel?
Right now, it's just the personnel cost. So we don't get reimbursed for the wear and tear on the rigs. But if the vehicle's damaged out there, they obviously pick up the cost of damage and things like that. We actually have to go through it. When we go through a demobilization process, we actually go through mechanical, and they check our rigs out. And if you break something on the incident, you go to the incident, you show them a piece of paper, hey, I broke a shock or a spring, they'll fix that. That's on the incident dime. So when you're on the state dime, that rig belongs to the state. But we don't get reimbursed after the fact for the engine. So that's a good question.
All right. Well, we thank you, Chip, for all things fire. I hope that what you've been able to determine is that fighting a fire is just not a bunch of men and women racing up in a truck, jumping out and grabbing a hose and throwing water out. There's a lot of science to it and a lot of preparation to it. I do know a valid story that what you hear today in coordination between agencies and that type of thing literally did not exist maybe 20 years ago. And one of the things that I think broke the bank here in Newport of jumping into a change is the station on Irvine Avenue. There was a house fire about 3 or 4 doors down from it on, I guess that's Dover as it continues towards Costa Mesa. And the person ran down to the fire station, and the fire station said, we can't fight it, it's in Costa Mesa. You have to call Costa Mesa. And that led to the chiefs here in Newport and Costa Mesa getting together and saying, that's ridiculous. We need to do something that has a predetermined coordination program. And so Chip has explained to you today where that has grown to in the state. So we thank you very much, Chip. And at this point in time, I, with tremendous pleasure, will turn this back over to Mr. Rosansky.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming this morning. A couple quick announcements. This is our last sort of monthly meeting for the year, so we get to focus on our last two things we're going to be doing this year. Next Tuesday is what we call our mayor's reception. It's going to be at the Back Bay Bistro Tuesday night starting at 6:30. That's the night that the city council convenes and the new mayor is selected, and the new council members that have won election this past November will be sworn in, and then they all come over for a big party at the Back Bay Bistro. So if you'd like to join us for that, you can go online at newportbeach.com and sign up for that. Register, it's $40, but you get dinner. It's actually a really nice dinner that's served there. And we also do our chamber awards as well for our Ambassador of the Year and our Silver Anchor. And then our last act of the year, is our biggest act of the year, is the Newport Beach Christmas Boat Parade, which starts 19th to the 23rd this year. So please come down to the waterfront. The parade travels the whole 14 and a half miles of the waterfront. I think it makes it just about everywhere except for maybe the Rhine Channel and up by Newport Island. But there's plenty of good viewing. Marina Park's an excellent place to view the parade. There's going to be a lot of activities going on down there this year. And so please come and join us for that. Our next Wake Up Newport meeting will be in January 3rd. So right after New Year's. I don't have the speaker lined up yet, but we will have one for sure. So all the DECA kids will be back to school. Make sure, and FBLA as well, put it on your calendar. It'll be a great program. And we've got a good lineup next year. President of Chapman University is coming. Hopefully the new mayor will be speaking in March. Our city manager's coming in February. Trying to get the head of Southern California Edison to speak to our group as well. So more good quality speakers. Have a great holiday season, and we'll see you next year. Thank you.